Hello, everybody, and welcome to International Podcast Day, September 30th, 2022. We are on the final stretch, at least of our live stream. And Steve, my day's been going great. I know your day's been going great. Happy International Podcast Day to everybody out there. Steve, what's the word, man? How you doing today?
The word is we still got a little partying to go. So let's continue that celebration. And, even everything that's going on in the world, Dave, we hit #1 again in social media, which is great. But every year, one of my favorite parts is when Todd comes on to the space and really tells it like it is. And I think we all need to hear that sometimes and get his perspective because he's one of the true insiders and visionaries of the podcasting space.
That's true. Yeah. And Todd, right before we hand it over to you, I do want to thank you and your company for being a consistent sponsor of International Podcast Day. I think you've been with us since the start, 2015. And to everybody out there that's not familiar with Todd and what Blueberry is doing, they've been dedicated to providing the most essential podcast tools to podcasters in the industry for almost 18 years, since 2005. And of course, they're going to do more than publish with Blueberry. You're going to work with connecting with your listeners. You're going to learn how to monetize your podcast. And of course, what we're all looking for is watching our show thrive and grow day after day, week after week, episode after episode. So we definitely encourage everybody to head over to blueberry.com to check out what they're doing. So you can see on the video stream, a little start free trial right there, Todd, a little big button on your homepage there. If you sign up, make sure you let them know that you heard them from Todd and the International Podcast Day team as well. So Todd, I'm going to step out of your way and hand it over to you. I know you're going to be talking about, 18 years of podcasting and what are the successful strategies you can employ today in a very modern and different industry than it was even just a few years ago.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. And not 34 hours tonight, gentlemen. This is a more manageable amount of time. So you guys are not ready to pass out right yet. So
yeah. I gave Steve a break this year.
I'm an old man. Okay, Come on.
Well, I think we're all looking a little long in the tooth, but no, I got a great presentation for you today. So we'll get into this here. I guess just a little bit of a background so that you all know a little bit about who I am. We're going to talk about success strategies and how to succeed today because the space continues to change and morph and move, and you really need to know really what to do to have a successful show. But I've been 18 years as an active podcaster. I've been live streaming for 10 years. So I was live streaming before it was cool to do so. I'm obviously the founder of Blueberry Podcasting. I do 3 shows: Geek News Central, the New Media Show, Podcast Insider. Now, Geek News Central is basically the Genesis show that I did when I first started podcasting. 1,625 episodes, New Media Show over 500 episodes for 10 years. I always say get a PhD in podcasting if you listen to or watch the New Media Show at newmediashow.com. And Podcast Insider is the show that I do for Blueberry. Of course, I do hold the title of having the longest continuous sponsor of a podcast. That's my podcast sponsor, GoDaddy, which has been with me since June of 2005. And later tonight, we'll be presenting the podcast awards, honoring 30 categories of podcasters, and of course, announcing our influencers of the year at podcastawards.com. So now that I've given myself accolades away, we'll get into a little bit of a meat here. I think as I talk to content creators on a regular basis, I hear this reoccurring theme. I want to grow my show. I want to grow my show. I want to grow my show. But what does success look like in podcasting? For some, it's exposure. Some, it's gaining authority. Some, it's gaining engagement. Some want to be famous. Some folks are using it as a lead funnel. And some people think about monetization. So really, success looks different for every specific show that is really being run out there today. And I think the key here is you have to set your goal. What you determine is success is key. And let me say that again. What you determine is success is key. If it's to hang out with a friend and just chit chat about the topic at hand, that's great. If it's for building leads into your business, great way to do that as well. Again, what you determine success is key. And you don't have to go immediately to monetization. You don't have to go immediately to doing a lead funnel. It's really what you want to do as a content creator. My goal when I started podcasting in October of 2004 was, number one, authority for my tech show, so I could build authority and go to cool events like CES, which at the time was called the Consumer Electronics Show. Now it's just CES, and a variety of other tech events. And number two was monetization, because monetization in those early days really didn't exist, and it was very expensive to do podcasting. So I was spending a considerable amount of money every month just to do my show. So really the goals were twofold: authority and monetization. But I really developed over time a strategy to succeed through a very simple formula. And I think this is one thing that, if you think about how you're doing your show today, I'm going to give you some tips to basically improve that process. And I call it the rinse, wash, dry, fold, repeat method. And there's a whole process behind rinse, wash, dry, fold, repeat. That's how we do laundry, right? We usually we wash them first, right? And then we rinse them, then we dry, and then we fold. But you get my point. There's a process to doing certain tasks, but many podcasters fail to do some of those basic tasks. And that first task is, it starts with a website. I've been promoting this literally since the days I started podcasting, and this was before I even became a podcast host, and saying there's no substitute for a dedicated website. Many times now, content creators will go have their show on somebody's.com, usually a hosting provider's.com, and they try to build a show just with audio. And that's not going to cut it. You're not going to be able to build a brand unless you're Oprah or some famous person that has an established brand. You are not going to build a successful podcast without building a brand, and that brand usually starts with a website that you can basically bring people into and send them out. Your podcast host webpage is not a substitute. And I'll say that again. Your podcast host webpage is not a substitute, because you're essentially competing with how many ever thousands of other shows that podcast host may have on their website. So if someone says something bad on a show, or links to something they shouldn't, or whatever 500 different things that Google looks for can cause a page rank to go down, you could be affected negatively and not even know why. It could be because of some other podcaster on that podcast host website has done something to cause Google to have scrutiny on that show, or on that site, on that .com. When you have your own .com, you control your destiny. Automated Reds. There's some folks that are using services or even plugins to generate a website from RSS, and that's bad too, because anytime that you are a syndication point, in other words, the content originates one place and you show it off another place, you're considered by Google to be a syndicator. So if the content doesn't originate on your own .com, you really set yourself up here not for failure, but having a much tougher time to succeed than most shows that are following the formula I'm going to talk about. Why do I need a website? Well, I call mine Moonbase Alpha. It's a place to call home. It's a place during my show where I can say, come to geeknewscentral.com, check out the great content on the website, and follow or subscribe to the podcast. We don't care if they listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google. We don't care where they listen, but they should know where your website originates. And that's really, really a big piece in this, is that really it's a place for you to build search engine optimization. Again, it's a gateway. Number one, for discovery. The number one way to build a podcast today is still word of mouth. But number two is search results. Search results sometimes on YouTube, sometimes within Google, to find content that a listener is looking for. It's a place where you can get inbound and outbound traffic. You can build monetization. You can have a funnel there, have a place where people can enter to get an email on your email list. You can build a community. But more importantly, it's truly, truly for Google. And I come back to this topic every couple of years to try to reemphasize the importance of this. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of why here in a few minutes. But I think that, really the key here, and the one thing that I want you to walk away from today, is you record your content for your audience. You record your content for your audience, but you write your show notes for Google, Bing, all these other search applications that are out there. You want to be, anybody can have their show found on Google. Doesn't matter where you host it. But the key is, can your episode that you just recorded be found in a Google search result? And oftentimes the answer is no. You might be on page 23 of Google search results. The goal is to be on page 1. And I don't always succeed at that, but I'll show you a few samples of where I have. And it's important to understand that when you write your show notes and you write your title to your show, you should write it for such that it would be something someone is searching for. I often say people don't have a content discovery problem. Most have a content search problem. That's really the key here. Is we only can spread the word so far by word of mouth and by listeners sharing the show with others. But when it comes to being discovered, how else are you going to get discovered? Someone's going to talk about you maybe on another show, maybe do a promo swap. There's varied ways to get yourself exposure, but most of the time someone is going to Google a topic. And if they land on that Google search results and your podcast episode is in that first page, guess what happens? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Often enough, they'll click through. They'll see that there's content there that's relevant to them, and they'll take a listen and they'll follow or subscribe. It's a numbers game, though. You have to build this up over time. So let's talk about Google search and content discovery. Number 1, descriptive titles. Really, that's really, really important. Descriptive titles, with that you reinforce those titles in the first paragraph of your show notes. Again, win the search lane. Also, get backlinks. When you interview someone for your show and you have them on, your number 1 goal is to request a backlink from their website to yours with potentially as much as of a paragraph of information explaining why they're linking to your website. Now, secondary could be a Twitter or Facebook link back to your site, but that's not as valuable as your host permanent website linking to you and providing you a link back. That link back gives Google the authority to say that this topic that we talked about during the show that I thought was so important to be the title of the episode, it gives relevance. It builds that over time. And of course, having your own website, control your SEO, build your brand, control your intellectual property. Site traffic is not impacted, but you can do this on WordPress. You can do this on Squarespace. You can do this on Wix, long as it is with your own top-level domain. And there's plenty out there. You don't have to have a .com anymore, .show. There's .live. There's a whole bunch of different domain names you can get today if the .com you want is not available. Let's talk a little bit about what I'm talking about here. So what I have is a podcast episode that I recorded where the topic was, one of the topics I thought was the most important topic I talked about during that show was deep fakes pose a growing danger. And deep fakes is a topic about people being able to create audio and video that is fake, sounds like you, looks like you, but is not you. So deep fakes pose a growing danger. I ranked right below, essentially number 1 or number 2. Had seen it article first, me number 2. That is where that particular episode has gotten a lot of traffic. How much traffic? a couple thousand Google page views a day. You multiply this over time, and then you end up with a lot of traffic. So my tech site gets between 20 and 200,000 web search hits a day. A percentage of those folks searching for content, subscribe to the podcast. But I also make it very easy for them to subscribe to the show once they land on my homepage. Again, they don't know I'm a podcaster. They have no clue. They're searching for information on deep fakes. They've landed on my website. They said, "Oh, there's a podcast there. Maybe it's something I'll be interested in listening to." Not everyone's going to, but a percentage will. Here's another one. What is sovereign data? And this is to do with some stuff with data flow within countries. It's a little bit. Actually, it did real well. There's 1, 2, 3 ads on the Google searches, and I'm number 1 in the search result. So what is sovereign data? You may not know what that is, but maybe you're doing some research on some things. Now you want to know, what is sovereign data? Well, guess what? Links to my website. Sovereign data is a topic within the episode. They can click on the link that's in my podcast, jump to that part of the content to listen about my discussion about what is sovereign data. So this is just an example, and it's rinse, wash, repeat. Every time I do an episode, this is the goal. I don't always win the Google search game. Sometimes much bigger sites than me drive me down into second or third or fourth place, or maybe onto the second page. But this is my goal for my show. It's just one of many things I do to grow my podcast. Another thing that you need to look at is, if you do have your website, is your website podcast ready? In other words, is there a way, once people do land on your homepage, to know that you're a podcaster? Many of you, I go to your website and you can't tell that you're a podcaster. You've got your podcast buried on page 5. And I always wonder, what is, complaining about not growing? Well, if you look at your Google Analytics, you're going to see that oftentimes, guess what? You have people landing on your website, but they leave almost immediately. They don't get into the deep pages of your website. So I always have your podcast front and center on your website. Make it easy for them to follow or subscribe to your show. Make it easy for them to follow or subscribe into each of your blog posts for your podcast. Make it easy to listen to your show. And then provide all those extra stuff like social and all those interactivities that you want, the newsletter link, everything. You want people to engage you. Don't make it hard. A lot of people are putting podcast websites up there. They look beautiful. They're aesthetically beautiful, but non-functional. You land on it, see this pretty image. You have to scroll halfway down the page, and then you got to find the link to the podcast. You need a website that will actually deliver you results and not necessarily be, again, what did I say earlier? You record for your audience, you write for Google, and it also is a way to make it easy for people to access and get access to you from your website, landing on the home page from above the fold, because they're oftentimes not going to scroll down further in the page to engage you. So what have I got there? I've got the subscribe to podcast links. I've got a link to my sponsor. I've got link there to Facebook, Twitter, to email. I've got the ability to subscribe to the newsletter. I've got information about our chat room. I've got all this info that's in every single episode, so that when someone lands on this page because they've done a Google search, they say, "Oh my goodness, this is a podcast. Let me subscribe to this individual show." Okay, we'll get off that topic and we'll move on to another tactic, is talk about social engagement. You need to hang out where your audience is. So you need to find out where your tribe hangs out. My particular tribe, for one of my shows, hangs out on Twitter. For a different show, they hang out on Facebook. Your tribe may hang out on Instagram, or it may be on TikTok, or it might be wherever, on Twitch. you need to hang out and be a resource. And why do I mean by being a resource? It's not there to be in there and self-promoting. Hey, I got a podcast about this. Come listen to it. That's not being a resource. That's being annoying. What you want to be is when someone comes up and says, hey, I got a question about this. You can say, I did an episode on this topic, and link to that episode and give them the time hack upon the topic where that topic started. So keep a good resource list in a spreadsheet to know what you've talked about in the past. I can't remember what I talked about in 1,600 episodes, but I have enough extensive show note data that I can find within my own website where that information is to give that individual a resource. Send them to your website, send them to that audio player, and tell them to go to 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Be a resource when you're doing social engagement. Just don't be out there promoting. No one likes to deal with a promoter. It gets old real quick. So recording, publishing, social, it's really not enough. And I can probably do an hour on each one of these topics. But here's the main thing. Sustained, consistent, superior podcast content is key. You have to have your game at an A game at all time. Sustained, consistent, superior podcast content. It's like you're going to your job. You want to be a superior performer to get promoted, get the best pay raises. If you can be that superior podcast content creator over time, doing all the things you need to do, you will build an audience. Some of you've got a book in you already and you don't even know it. You're recording interviews, you're recording content for your show. You are essentially, by the simple fact that you're creating podcasts, are creating enough content to transfer that into a book. I was very successful in the book that I wrote about podcasting. It sold 45,000 copies. Now, why was it successful for me as a podcaster? Because guess what? I was able to promote it, and I was able also to know exactly what I was talking about when it came to write the book. Because the content and everything I was doing in podcasting allowed me to write a book. And by the way, that book is long in the tooth at this point. It was published in 2005. It was one of the first book on podcasting, which helped with some success. But at the same time, there's a book in every podcaster. Attend trade shows, events in your content genre. I'm not saying going to podcast events are the perfect thing. If you've got limited PTO and you're an independent content creator, if you're looking to build the value of the content in your audience, go to trade shows or events that are in exactly your content genre. For many, many years, I was going to NAB, the National Association Broadcaster Show, and I was also going to the CES show because that allowed me to do a lot of different interviews, get a lot of different exposure to different people. And what it really did was open doors to sponsorships, to relationships, to speaking gigs. I'm getting ready here in just a couple of weeks to go to Saudi Arabia to speak to 15,000 creators where they're trying to open up and be able to have a creator, I guess for better words, a creator space in that country. So it's going to be interesting to go talk to those creators. So that opportunity would not have come unless I was doing all these things to have gotten my brand out and everything else. You can solicit radio appearances. Well, why would I do that, Todd? Well, when you get to episode, let's say 100 or 50, or maybe it's an anniversary show, contact your local radio station. Say, hey, I'm doing a podcast. I'm getting ready to hit 100 episodes. This is what it's going to be on. Are you interested? And you might be surprised at the number of times that you'll get someone say, sure, or come in this station, or if it's a television, maybe we'll come out and shoot it in your studio. And, they spend 2 hours with you, but get 3 minutes on TV. So radio and TV can be used to your advantage. They're always looking for filler content. They may not use you 1 week, but they may take that content, or maybe they got a special segment coming up on podcasting, and you would be the person they say, oh, remember that person that reached out to us, said he had a podcast or she had a podcast? Let's reach out to that individual and see if we can do an interview. You get this type of attention. By me appearing on radio and TV, what it did is for when I was living in Hawaii, it opened up to me to be on BBC Asia. I would get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. They would say, Todd, we'd like you to speak on this particular topic. Can you do that? And I'm like, yes. And of course, I'd often run to my computer and Google the topic to make sure I was ready. And 10 minutes later, I'd be on the air for 3 minutes with BBC Asia and getting a plug-in for the show. It's that type of stuff you have to do. Speak locally first, go around and say, hey, I do a podcast. I'd like to, talk to you about it. Maybe go into a group that is content oriented and speak. Get your legs on speaking in front of an audience before you go national. And here's one of the things too, and this is just a tip that I'm just going to throw in there. If you take as much attention, if you do as much attention to speaking locally as you do to each and every episode, you're going to be a better podcaster. Because if you're going to go speak in front of a bunch of people live, it's almost like you don't want to be embarrassed in front of everyone. So you definitely prep and you practice a little bit. Well, that's the same thing you can do with your podcast. Always imagine that you're speaking to a live audience. But anyway, work on speaking locally, build up to nationally. That's what I did. I've been all over the country speaking in front of podcasters and speaking in front of other professional groups. Another option might be to join a podcast network. Maybe that's a consideration that you would do. If you join a podcast network, there are definitely things you need to watch out for. You need to read the contract, number one. You need to know what you're getting into. But I always tell people, if you join a podcast network, make sure you never leave your .com. Build your brand while at the same time working with a network. Connect with the companies or individuals that you are already talking to. If you've talked to 25 different people, make sure you stay connected with them. Leverage, see what's going on with them. Stay connected so that you can utilize and they'll know that you're interested in what they're doing. I do it all the time with companies that I work with in the tech space. I connect with them all the time. Hey, what's going on? What's new? You guys have something you're going to release? So I can at least get a little early information and maybe get that scoop that's going to drive more traffic to my website. Also, don't be afraid to leverage your audience. This is the most important thing. I found my executive producer for my show through my audience. I found the founders of Blueberry Podcasting through my audience. It's a kind of interesting story. I said on my podcast one day, hey, I'm looking for a lawyer. I'm looking for an MBA. I'm looking for a programmer, and I'm looking for a graphics person. We're having a phone call in 10 days. A lawyer was on the phone, an MBA was on the phone, and a graphics person was on the phone. The graphic person knew a programmer. Brought him on the phone. We formed Blueberry Podcasting over the telephone from my audience. So if I can leverage my audience to build a company, you can leverage your audience to find people to help you with social, have people with album art, help you with research, all these things that's going to make your show better. You'll have some super fans that will want to work and oftentimes will not require to be paid until you build to the point where you are in a position to be able to do so. I'm lucky enough, I'm able to pay my executive producer each month for the work he does. He gets an hourly rate and he just bills me his hours, and I wrote him a check. It's the best money I ever spend because I basically got 2 or 3 of my hours back every week for the 2 shows I do with him as the producer. So don't be afraid to leverage your audience. And again, being part of a network can help build backlinks. So that's something to consider too. Building those backlinks is really, really important because if you're working with other podcasters, you can be cross-linking to each other. And if you're all part of a network that has the same type of a genre of content, that can be super, super value. So this is something that goes against many, many folks in the podcasting space. They tell you, do a season. My idea of doing a season is if you're going to do season 1 ends on Friday and season 2 begins on Monday, especially for the first 2 years. So if you're trying to build a show, my simple rule of thumb is no break for the first 2 years of podcasting with a podcast frequency of 1 to 2 episodes a week. We see shows that are a weekly show grow twice as fast as those that are bi-monthly. So make sure you get an episode out every week of your podcast if you can do it. It's really, really important. And again, when you're new to the space, people build you into their lives. If you leave them hanging, they will go find something else. They will go find something else to listen to. Again, listeners build you into their lives. Don't leave them hanging. Let me talk about something that happened to me. When I hit my 200th episode, I was planning a big celebration. I was really excited to put this presentation, put the show out in front of my audience. And there was no live at the time. It was just a regular podcast. This was in 2006. And the day of my 200th episode, I got notified that my father had died in an automobile accident. And so as I was packing up to fly my family back to Michigan for a funeral and to bury my father, I recorded a very, very short episode. I basically said, "Hey, this is Todd. There's no show 200 tonight. My father's been killed in an automobile accident. I'll be back in 10 days." And at the time, there where I lived, and it's still in rural America, very, very internet challenged. And there wasn't as much communication devices as we have now. And basically for 10 days, I was email dark. And when I came back from that 10 days of basically burying my father, when I opened my email inbox, there was over 5,000 emails of condolence from my audience. And this is where I understood what community and building a family of listeners really was all about. So I consider my audience in my tech show to be part of my ohana, being part of my family. And I can't emphasize enough that they have a relationship with you that you don't fully understand. They come to your show to listen to you. They don't come often to listen to the show for your guest. When Rob and I do the new media show and we have a guest, our download numbers, our play numbers are always lower than when it's just him and I alone. It's a very interesting dynamic. So if you are doing an interview show and you don't have someone to interview, don't be afraid to do a solo show. Say, "Oh, I don't have nobody to interview. I don't have Don't be afraid to put out an episode by yourself. You might be very, very surprised on the results. Next thing is you never know who's listening. And the story I tell about that is there's two of them. I'll just tell you one today. Is I was I had bought the very first Mac Mini, and the Apple Mac Mini in its very first generation was a piece of junk. It was a horrible Mac computer. It really did not live up to what we would expect or what you would expect today from the Apple brand. And I was on blast on my show talking about how bad this Mac Mini was. And I made a comment in the show. I said, I wish I had 15 minutes to tell Steve Jobs exactly what I think about this Mac Mini. Well, I said it in passing. But about a week later, my phone rang, and it was a lady on the phone, and she says, "Todd, I have Steve for you." I said, "Steve who?" "I have Steve Jobs on the line for you." I about fell out of my chair, and she put Steve on, and him and I had a 15-minute conversation, not all about the Mac Mini, but how I was using it and why it wasn't being a great computer. And, really, it blew me away. Now, Steve wasn't the one that was listening to my show, but someone at Apple was listening to my show and said, "Hey, Steve, you need to hear this guy complaining about this Mac Mini." What ended up following up from that was 3 days later, I got a call from the Apple store in Ala Moana in Honolulu and said, "Hey, we have something for you. Will you come down?" And I went down to the store with a friend of mine, Ryan Ozawa, and they handed me a MacBook Pro, the first Intel version of the MacBook Pro, across the counter. It was like the seas parted when I walked into this Apple store because they knew it was from Steve. And they had a message with it. Now, I've still got that computer. I don't have the box for it, sadly. Wasn't signed by him, But just the sentimental fact that he sent me a MacBook Pro shows you never know who's listening to your show. So always keep that in mind. You would think that you would, if you're talking about a certain topic, consider that the person that is the foremost expert in the space on your topic may be listening. If you approach it that way, you have a little different attitude in the content that you're creating. Do not get discouraged. This is a marathon, it's not a drag race. Finding your true voice will truly take time. It really is a situation where you have to do enough hours in front of the mic, enough interviews, really to get really, really good. Howard Stern did not get good overnight. He did thousands and thousands of interviews. He is the master of dragging stuff out of people today. If you become a good interviewer, if you're doing an interview show, you will have much success over time by pulling out nuggets out of people that others have not been able to, and have those gems be highlights for your show. If you're a solo show, just work on perfecting your pacing, your voice, everything that you do, and stay consistent. Perfecting your show will take time. And believe me, I destroy the English language on a daily basis. I really do. I have the ability to say things that has actually earned me from my audience. They call them Toddisms, things that I've said wrong over the years that just kind of stuck with people. If you get people remembering your Toddisms, you're making an impact. Of course, I corrected that stuff over time, so there tries not be as many Toddisms, but perfecting your show will take time. So from this presentation today, I want you to take some action items. And these are probably some of the most important things that you can do to help grow your show. Number one, of course, is great content titles and supporting show notes. That is super, super key. Work on your content titles. Spend time thinking about the content that you've just created and what the best title for that content is going to be. Only you, as a content creator, can really determine that. Not your virtual assistant, not the person that helps you with your podcast. You have to understand what that title is and translate that into something that someone is going to search on the web for. And number two, have a paragraph of supporting show notes that back that title up so that you give the Google search engine something to chew on. Number two, make it easy. Make it easy for someone to subscribe, follow, contact, or listen to you. If I can't land on your web page today and I can't subscribe to you, I can't follow you on social, I can't contact you, or I can't listen by just what appears on the main page of the website without moving my mouse, you have failed. Because again, you have to give this information in a matter of seconds so people realize what's going on. Because if you don't, they will leave. So make it easy to subscribe, follow, contact, or listen. Number three, always ask for a backlink. If you're doing an interview or you've done a product review or whatever it may be, ask the company, ask the individual for a hyperlink from their website back to you. I make sure that if I'm interviewing someone important, that I know who their PR team is so that I can make sure that that information gets to them, they can put on their website and link back. People have egos. Stroke those egos. Because they want to say, oh, I was interviewed on such and such podcast. And they want that on the web. They want that seen. They want people to hear their voice because people that you interview have agendas. They want to sell something. They want to build authority. They have a goal as well. You have a goal for your podcast. Your host has a goal. Make that make that guest, reach their goals as well. Ask for that backlink. Get it. Number four, ensure your website is mobile first. It's very simple to check that. Load it in your mobile phone. If you only have an iPhone, load it in iPhone. If you have a friend that has an Android phone, ask to borrow the phone and load it in the Android phone to see how it looks. make sure it's mobile first, because Google ranks everything on mobile first. They don't care what your website looks like on a desktop. They want to make sure that it's mobile ready, that someone comes to your website with a mobile phone, they can navigate it and see the content well. If they don't, guess what's going to happen? They're going to downrank your site. Action number 5 is establish a social presence. And that social presence, again, is where people that listen to your show and where people that are your content genre hangs out. You got to figure that out. Sometimes you may have to make them a place to hang out and drive them there, but that's harder. But you got to figure out where people hang out and establish your social presence there. It's is as important as promoting your podcast. So those are the 5 action items that I wanted to share with you. Oh, I've got 6. Action item number 6, recording, publishing, and social is not enough. It's really not enough. Recording, publishing, and social is not enough. You got to go back and do those other things that I talked about earlier in the episode. And if you have something that's worked for you, that's worked out real well, I'd love to hear your idea so I can add it to my list of items that you need to do to help grow your show. So if you've got something that's worked real well for you, tell me that little secret item. You'll be able to email me. I'll give you my contact information here in just a minute. Here's a bonus slide. And I'm not one to brag about money, but I want to tell you the importance of a website and why the particular page that's up on the screen is valuable. I've had GoDaddy as a sponsor since 2005. How have I kept GoDaddy as a sponsor since 2005? I've been able to do it by delivering brand new customers to GoDaddy on a monthly basis, meeting my minimum requirement that I have to hit every month to keep them happy, to keep them writing a check. What I do in my studio here for my personal show would not be possible without that sponsorship. So I work very hard to make sure the sponsor's happy. That landing page, which is at geeknesscentral.com/GoDaddy, is responsible for some of that success. I have a dedicated page for my sponsor. You may need a dedicated page for your funnel. You may need a dedicated page and a compelling reason for your newsletter, whatever it may be. That particular page is probably worth $3 million over the past, since 2005, for 17 years in value. And matter of fact, anytime I have someone that works with me and basically is paying me money, I put up a dedicated webpage for them to refer to, because not only do I get people that listen to my show to buy GoDaddy products and services, I have people that search for GoDaddy products and services and land on this landing page and buy GoDaddy products and services using my promo code. Does GoDaddy know this? Yes. What is the most important thing, again, about that sponsorship is meeting my numbers, making them happy. But that would not be possible if I didn't keep fresh content coming to the website, fresh traffic coming, keeping the site relevant, keep it moving. The site can't just sit there and be stale, because all of a sudden, as soon as the content is stale on the website, GoDaddy will continue, or not GoDaddy, but Google will continue to drop the ranking value of your website. So again, continuous audience growth, ongoing sponsor support, opportunities outside podcasting, you build page rank. And again, the value of this page is significant over all this time. So that's something to think about. Now, again, I've been podcasting a long time. I have over 15,000 articles on my website. But at the same time, not all of those are podcast episodes. I keep feeding the beast, rinse, wash, repeat. I keep feeding the Google engine more content so that the traffic will continue to come to the website. So I have more new listeners coming in, because podcast listeners will not stay with you forever. They'll stay a couple of years and they'll go. How do I know this? I've been doing this 16 years. They come, they go, they come back. Matter of fact, I have people come back all the time. So, oh, you're still doing the show. I'm back listening to the podcast again. I was gone for 3 years. Why? Because they got tired of listening to me and they went and listened to someone else. So I hope you got something out of this today. And if you have questions or if you'd like a copy of this deck, all you have to do is email me, Todd@blueberry.com. That's blueberry without the E's, because we couldn't afford the E's. I'm at Geek News personally on Twitter. The company is at Blueberry on social. We're on Instagram and all the other places, LinkedIn. So definitely look me up or drop me an email. Happy to share this deck with you. So Steve, rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah, matter of fact, I need to do some of that once podcast day is over. Because it's interesting. I was going to ask you, when you guys were putting together this concept, when you had this phone meeting, putting together a podcast hosting company, were you guys so drunk that you misspelled Blueberry?
No, and actually the parent company is called Raw Voice.
Correct.
And so Blueberry didn't come till later. And part of it is because the term podcasting was kind of, well, at the time, Apple had sued a couple of companies that were using pod in app names. And this was before the iPhone even. This was in the early days of this. They weren't even phone apps. They were just like desktop apps. So we were scared to use the word podcast as part of our company name. In hindsight, we probably should have used the word Raw Voice, because it ended up being, but that's the parent company. And yeah, so Blueberry was, and to be honest with you, we were in a hotel in Chicago drinking when we came up with Blueberry. So there's a little truth to that.
Just like back in the days when we used to go to, what was it, Riverside or Southern California?
Yeah. It was
Ontario.
There
Yep.
you go.
Yeah. So, hey, Todd, man, it is always great to have your presentations to really give us not just ideas, but a path to walk down, because it's critical. Because I think a lot of podcasters think they know the ropes, but they don't live inside the sphere that you do. And you have the proof of the knowledge because it shows. And I think people really need to pay attention to that. As this industry continues to blossom, hopefully we don't lose some of those educational components that are so important to really doing a proper job in podcasting.
Everyone's got an idea what to do, and it's really not that complicated. It's fundamental stuff that you just have to grind through. And be honest with you, it's hard work, and that's why there's so many people that fail. And the putting out a show is just a minor piece of what you need to do to grow it. And I saw a post today. Someone said, I need someone to manage this and this and that because I don't have time. I'm like, well, guess what? If you're not going to do it and you're not willing to pay someone to do it, you are going to fail. So I think people just have to understand this is like, you don't see YouTubers get successful overnight. They put out hundreds and hundreds of videos before they climb the charts to be able to have a successful show.
Yeah, I think it's...
Dave, I was just going to say, all the production that I have done all over the years, I was very fortunate. I had a whipping boy named Dave.
I did a lot of the work. That is fact. Yeah. I like to write, so I made that happen. So, Todd, I actually took some of your advice several years ago, and I'm not sure where. It's probably on a podcast day event or some conference, but I heard it from you and multiple people or about attending trade shows as a podcaster. And guess what I did is I went through their website and got a press kit or a media release,
a media pass, right?
Media patch, yeah. And it was great because then you walk around there, you got your little microphone. Steve and I were doing a tech podcast at the time. I'd attend STEM conventions.
Oh.
I would attend educational conventions because guess what? They're all talking about what's the new technology for teachers, what's going on in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd reach out to these organizations, say, hey, I do this show. We do a lot of this stuff. We're, 300-400 episodes in, would love to have a press pass. And sure enough, guess what they do? They hand you over the reins. They're like, here, you can talk to this person, you can talk to that person. And that's just a really good networking opportunity. You can talk to not only, creators and founders and organizers of events. But then if you start making a history of it and going 1 year, second year, third year, you start seeing the same people and they're saying exactly, oh, Dave's going to be here. I'd love to get on him. on his show. So, hey, let's talk to this person. You got to talk to this person. It's like all of a sudden you're in the media room and then you're doing this, you're doing that. And it's just a great way, one, to connect and expand your audience and your network, but also it's easy content for your
Easy
show.
content.
Boom,
Yeah.
you upload it, you splice it, and out you go. And it took a week's worth of your time. It cost you a hotel stay and some food. And but it's great using those not only regional events, whether they may be, in like San Diego, LA, Palm Springs, wherever it may be, but even those hyper localized things, the things that happen at your university, things that happen at your libraries, things that happen at your business showcases in town. Those are all great ideas to just get and connect and work your magic when it comes to being a really good podcaster.
I call it the gift that keeps on giving, because once you make that contact and you go back years following, then they know who you are. It's like we did an interview with this little company called GoPro, and that was their first year at CES. They had a 20 by 20 booth and people weren't paying them a lot of attention. I went in there. I'm like, what have you got? And I saw this camera. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And I think we're one of a handful of folks that gave them any decent press coverage and some time on camera. And it was like then for years and years and years, you'd walk in the booth and it's like they roll out the red carpet for you and you have have conversation with executives and everything. So, it's also fun to see those companies that are in those small booths that are 10 by 10 that then blow out and get big, and they never forget. And that, who had talked to them and gave them that, wow, you're here and you maxed your credit card out to show that off. That's really cool. And then maybe something you did with that content, someone saw it again. So it's all the situations are different, but it's what does everyone have? Everyone has an agenda when these go to events. They got an agenda to learn, and they have an agenda to maybe, if they're an exhibitor or company that's rolling something out, they want to get the word out, and you can be that conduit. So,
Boy, we could tell some CES stories. I
we can
remember
tell some.
one year we were trying to put the tech podcast booth together, and they shut us down because of the union,
That's
because of
right.
some of the work we were doing.
Yeah, and we sat there and waited till the CES rep came and cleared it up, because you don't want to upset the Teamsters.
No. No. Are you in your office, Todd? It looks different.
Yeah, I'm in my office. The studio's right behind me. So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's all set up to do the podcast awards ceremony in about 2 hours.
Yeah. And folks, it's going to be exciting. You need to go to podcastawards.com, watch a stream this evening, and not just congratulate the winners, but congratulate all the great shows that are every year that are listed in there. Dave and I do that every year. We go through and we look up some new shows and see if we might be wanting to subscribe to their shows. It's a great way.
There's some powerhouse shows in there this year that have some amazing audiences.
Oh, how could there be? Dave and I aren't on the list.
Well, there are some very and again, what's interesting is you got these big powerhouse shows that are competing with shows with, I would say average audience sizes.
Yeah.
And man, sometimes they go right head to head, and the votes come down to just literally ones and twos.
Gosh.
Between the winner and the loser, or not loser, but the ones that don't make the, don't become the winner of the category.
Right.
So it always amazes me every year how it all lines up when I'm going through and we're auditing the voting results. It is pretty amazing. It sure is. But we had 5.7 million listeners participate this year.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a record, isn't it?
It's not a record, but it's close. It's
wow.
Close. Yeah. Big number.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it's great every year when I go over there and watch the awards, and even afterwards when I go over to the categories, I always pick up a new show every year. Every year I'm finding something. It could be in a category that I'm interested in. It could be a category that I'm not interested in. There's so much good content out there. Todd, you see it through Blueberry, you see it through the awards, and there's so many great voices and so much talent out there. And it takes, we talk about discoverability quite a bit in the podcast space, and this is a great way, to learn about it.
It's huge. The folks that get on the slate, they get a year's worth of, SEO back to their websites. But anyway, so I know you guys have Ariel coming on. Say hello to her when you guys get her on. And I think she's going to, I don't know if she's going out to where I'm going in Saudi or not. I know there's There's a few people going out there, but
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
We'll have to ask
but-
her.
Yeah, you'll have to ask her. I don't know if she's going to that one or not. She just got back from Asia or something like that. She's out at an Asia conference.
Yeah, she's out in Malaysia or Indonesia.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Todd,
yeah.
as always, thanks for everything you do for us every year.
Absolutely.
Truly appreciate it.
Glad to see you guys back, and even if it's in a reduced hourly form, because we don't need to have a stroke doing 34 hours straight.
It
this
was
year.
getting close, but the community out there is really what's taken on the life of International Podcast Day and doing their own celebrations, and that's truly what it's about.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. Bye.
Sounds good, Steve. I think let's wrap up this hour. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Of course, we do encourage you to head over to blueberry.com. And when you guys, check out that free trial, even if you sign up, just make sure you let Todd and his entire team over at Blueberry know that the International Podcast Day team sent you. And Steve, as we finish out the rest of our day, we encourage everybody to head out there and use the hashtag International Podcast Day.
See you in the next one.
All right.